Welcome to the Craft of Coaching podcast, where we dive into what it truly takes to become a skilled, confident life coach. I'm your host, Kate, head of the CLCC, or Certified Life Coach Collective, an ICF-accredited Level 1 coach training program. We combine courage, coaching, and community to offer you more than just a training program, but a life-changing experience where you use your own personal transformation as the learning ground for supporting your clients. On this podcast, we explore how you can use coaching skills to support your clients or expand your own growth, all grounded in evidence-based coaching practices. Learn more about our program and get free resources for becoming a life coach at teamclcc.com. And now, here's today's episode. All right, today we're going to talk about how you can help your clients to embrace the inner critic. That is not usually what people talk about when they talk about the inner critic. Usually, people talk about, I want my inner critic to shut the F up and go away. I don't like it. I don't want it around. And people's inner critics show up in a lot of different ways, but we're going to start with a couple of things that are pretty important in today's podcast episode for this drastic reframing of how you approach the inner critic. And it's going to start with you, because if internally you still have an orientation yourself of like, yeah, that inner critic just needs to shut up. It's not saying anything helpful. I don't want it in my life. If you do that with your own relationship to the inner critic, then you will pass that along to your clients. And I always think that there's an opportunity for learning and expanding the tools that we can use with our clients and with ourselves. And that's one of the most beautiful things about being a coach. So let's get into it. All right. Why would we want to embrace the inner critic rather than telling it to go away, especially because inner critics can be very mean? Well, a couple of things. First, let's do this. Everyone has some kind of internalized critic. People experience it differently. I have actually heard people who have said, well, I don't know that I relate to this inner critic voice thing, because I don't have an inner critic voice that shows up. And I think two things are going on there. One, in Buddhist philosophy, there's a long-standing idea that everyone has an internalized critic, and that it's not until you begin the process of waking up that you actually become aware of it. So either you or some of your clients, and this is just a theory, I'm not prognosticating upon you here, but one possibility for people who say, I don't have an internalized critic, could be that those people have it. They just are really cut off from any awareness of it. And that there will be some kind of life event or something that they go through that starts to make them more aware. Maybe the process of working with you as their coach. The other thing I hear is people say, I don't think I have that internalized critic. But when we dig a little bit deeper, what we find is that they may not have a literal narrative of words or thoughts in their head, but they do have somatic signals. I've done other Craft of Coaching podcast episodes on, integrating somatic awareness into your coaching sessions. I think it's really valuable because the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better. If you're going to build a house, you don't just use a hammer and nails. You use a saw, and you use paint, you use, plumbing material, all the things to use that, the metaphor here. And so for you as a coach, if you're only doing very cognitive level coaching that's about taking people's thought processes and reframing them, or very action-oriented coaching that's about people say they're stuck, so your form of coaching is nudging them into action so that they can start to experience change. Those are two tools. Why wouldn't you want to have more, right? Let's get more tools. So the self-awareness, or rather the somatic awareness, might be something that the client needs to develop. But often with a little bit of playing around with it, the client, you can find that the client might not have words they can put to it, but they can say things like, well, the reason I can't go after that thing I want is because this feeling comes over me of like, I feel just embarrassed and stupid. That's what it might sound like when a client has more of a strong somatic signal than an actual narrative in their head. But like I said, Inner critic, it's ubiquitous. Everyone has an inner critic, okay? One of the things I talk about in the courage habit is that the way people often relate to their inner critic mirrors some of the different things that we've seen in psychology before. So for instance, the 3 most common but ineffective strategies for handling the critic are avoiding, placating, or attacking. When people avoid the critic, and this could be the population of people who, they say, I don't really hear that internalized critical voice. It's entirely possible that it's because they avoid it. They avoid dealing with it. They avoid tuning into it. They distract themselves. They numb out. Again, not at all an accusation. I'm not judging. We've all done all 3 of these, right? Like when we're uncomfortable, myself included, at some point we avoid, placate, or attack. These are just very common ways to deal with uncomfortable things in life. When somebody is placating their critic, that is often if I just do everything exactly right, I won't have this critical voice come up. So that's when you're, the overthinking, the trying to be perfectionistic, the people pleasing, just do it all right. My critic won't come up. And then the third, and this is what you see a lot of social media memes on, they float around and stuff like that, attacking the critic. Basically tell that voice inside of you to F off. Tell that voice, inside of you to take a hike, ignore it, kick that voice's ass, kick fear's ass. These, the memes and things that you see on social. Here's the problem though. Avoiding, placating, and attacking the critic are ineffective. If those strategies worked, you and your clients would no longer struggle with the internalized critic. So at a certain point, don't we all need to look around and go, hey, if something isn't working, we need to try a different approach. So here's this podcast episode, I hope, is going to flip everything around for you, because this approach, I can say from personal experience, I can say from working with clients, that my internal critic, my inner critic, is not nearly as strong in terms of the harshness as it was 10 or 15 years ago, period, point blank. So what do we need to turn around with the critic? Well, first of all, the critic is not your enemy, actually. It's not actually trying to take you down. In fact, the critic is a reflection of past wounds. The critic knows that you've been hurt, that you've tried things and failed. The critic is aware of the fact that if you try taking a risk, you could get hurt again. The critic's aim, actually, is to survive and to help you survive. The critic actually just wants you to survive. The critic knows that if you are a coach and you're saying to yourself, you know what, I really want to scale up my practice this year and quit my corporate job and fully move into coaching full time. The critic is going to come in with whatever strategy it needs to come in with to make you not do that. And maybe it's going to come in and it's going to tell you that you have to be perfect or you're going to fail. Or maybe it's going to tell you what's the point of even trying because you're a loser. Maybe it's going to tell you that you're selfish if you try to put a bunch of time into developing your business, because doesn't your family really need you right now? Maybe it's going to tell you to do way more than you could reasonably be expected to do to develop a business as a form of self-sabotage to keep you from actually succeeding. The critic is not trying to harm you. It is actually trying to make you survive. And it knows that if it can tell you that you're a worthless piece of crap, or that you're selfish if you do this, or that you're not going to succeed anyway, that then you won't take that risk and then get even more hurt, because it hurts when we try to change our lives and we don't see the results we want. It's disappointing. It's frustrating. So the embracing of the critic is about understanding that it's a wounded part of yourself. And particularly with attacking the critic, it's emotional abuse. It does not make sense to say, hey, I think my critic behaves abusively towards me. It does, right? In many cases. Hey, the critic is abusive, so I'm going to abuse it back? No. The lens I always like to have people look at their critics through is imagine that that's a kid. Because the critic is not highly regulated. It's dysregulated. It's based in fear. It's afraid. It's terrified. So take a small child that has limited emotional regulation skills and limited emotional maturity. And now, how would you deal with a small child? Would you be willing to relate to yourself, to your fear, to this tender, wounded part of yourself with the same care and compassion that a child deserves? This is a legitimate question because perpetuating emotional abuse towards children is not okay, and perpetuating emotional abuse towards yourself is not okay. The critic is wounded, it's scared, it's terrified. So imagine that you have a small child in front of you that is wounded and scared and terrified. If you decide, you know what, I don't want to deal with this, and you lock that child in the closet and you avoid it, guess what? That's called child abuse. Let's say that you have a small child who's very dysregulated, very upset, and you go, oh, okay, let's placate it. You know what, honey, here you go. It's okay. Here, we're going to make it all better. I'm not talking about meeting emotional needs like after a child has an injury. I'm talking about times when, like, fear, as it does, is spilling all over the place, like temper tantrums, stuff like that. If you're constantly placating a temper tantrum, might not be child abuse, but good luck when that kid is out in the real world and nobody's around to placate them all the time. I would say it's irresponsible as a parent, and I am a parent, to not give my child emotional coping skills. And then third, of course, attacking the critic is a common thing. And then if you attack a child, obviously, again, child abuse. So we've got three options, really: avoiding, placating, or attacking. Two of them are abusive, and one of them, while not technically abusive, is not at all in somebody's best interest. Why would you abuse yourself the way your critic has been abusive towards you? We all got out of kindergarten at some point, right? We all know that tit for tat, you hit me, so I hit you back, is like not emotional maturity, right? So let's go through some of the ways that you can reframe how you respond to the inner critic. And I go into these in more detail in my book, The Courage Habit, because a lot of how you reframe your relationship to fear and practice courage is how you deal with this internalized voice. My approach is, by the way, research informed. It draws on narrative therapy, CBT, DBT, a lot of different therapeutic approaches, although, of course, I only apply these with coaching. But it is important to me to state that this does come from a research-informed perspective. So, a couple of options for this. First, access the body. Okay? A lot of times what happens is the fear kicks off. We feel all the things. We feel dysregulated physically. And when you feel really heavily dysregulated physically, it's very hard to get clear thinking back on track. With accessing the body, meditation and mindfulness exercises are a great option, and many people, especially when they're first doing this work, have a kind of a backlog of emotions that they've never expressed. And so there might be clients, and I've certainly sat with them, and I've been the client myself, who maybe just need to be in a safe space to cry. To just cry. There might be clients where they need to access the body by actually tapping into their anger. Maybe they need to drop the F-bomb like 20 times in a row. And again, be in a safe, non-judgmental space for that to happen. This is work that I do with clients, because I subscribe to this idea that our emotions often get bottled up or kind of contained. I love this image that the Challenge Day organization gave me years ago of the emotional balloon. If you can imagine a balloon that gets too full of air, there are only two ways for that air to leak out, to get out. One is for if the balloon explodes, the other is if the air leaks. When people explode, it's a full-on crash out. They're burned out. They're enraged. They're furious. They're like, it's like completely melting down. When the air leaks out, that would be somebody's emotional balloon. Being passive aggressive, being low-key resentful. And often what happens when we're bottling up these emotions so much is that we end up feeling just kind of meh about life. And I often find that clients that I'm working with who feel like they would say, I have so much I should be grateful for. There's so much that I know is good in my life, and yet I don't feel good. I don't feel fully alive. And that's a really hard space to be in. As a coach, you do need to make sure that you are ethical and responsible in helping your clients to regulate their emotions. If some big stuff comes up during a session, it's important that you know how to do that. I'll just share that is something that we cover in the Certified Life Coach Collective, because the reality is that if you are working with clients for a while, you're going to come across situations where clients need to let some emotions out. And I do not believe that emotions are solely the domain of therapy. The reason I don't believe that is because I've never gone 24 hours without an emotion. Emotions are part of your everyday experience. They are part of breathing oxygen and drinking water and eating food and getting sleep. You are a human. You feel things. Now, if somebody is highly dysregulated, if somebody is dysfunctionally dysregulated, if someone is having such extreme dysregulation that they are not going to work or bathing or things like that, same thing, coaches need to be ethical about referring out to a therapist. Yes, that is more extreme. But the point I'm trying to make is that in coaching, even in everyday experiences, you are going to have clients who have emotions, and knowing how to work with clients around accessing the body and feeling emotions in ways that you can hold a container for that experience is important. The next thing that comes up when people want to relate to their inner critic differently is listening without attachment. And we can go back to that kid metaphor with this one. Listening without attachment. Listen without attachment. Sometimes kids who are in a highly dysregulated state just need someone to sit and listen to them. But when somebody's listening to them, it's important that that parent doesn't get attached to what the kid is saying. If the kid is saying, I don't like anything, or I hate you, or something like the parent has to have some understanding. Like, okay, kid is saying things, might not mean them, doesn't have the full emotional understanding of them. Same thing with listening to your fear. You cultivate a skill to be able to hear what the fear is saying or experience it somatically, if your client or you primarily experience your critic somatically, and be able to go, okay, I hear it, and I'm not necessarily doing what it says. So fear might be really spun up and overwhelmed. Oh my God, if you don't do this right now, everything's going to... And it's like, you got to be able to listen to that and not attach to it and think that the fear that's going, oh my God, is actually based in reality. Fear is very real, but it likes to tell tall tales. So again, the ability to listen to the fear, which means you're not avoiding it, you're not placating it, you're not attacking it, but to listen to it, but without attaching to what it says, is enormously powerful. Next, there's reframing limiting stories. This involves being able to recognize the capital S stories or internalized narratives that limit your life. These internalized narratives often operate completely on autopilot without people really thinking about it or noticing it. And they tend to then inform the decisions that we make. When I talk about capital S stories in the CLCC program, I make the point that, if you carry a story that people are inherently good and do the best they can with what they've got, that will drastically alter your experience of the world in comparison to if you carry a story that people are fundamentally selfish and always out for themselves and they'll screw you over if they get the chance. You have to become aware of these stories, which are often developed in childhood, and then consciously reframe limiting stories. And I am not talking about sprinkling fakey fake affirmations over everything. I am talking about simple reframes. So when you are working with a client and that client says, I feel like I want to do this, but then, I feel so overwhelmed. Working with your client on, okay, what are some other feelings that come alongside overwhelm that you could open up to if they're more somatically inclined? Like excitement. Excitement can live alongside overwhelm. Or it could be more of an internalized narrative that you're working with, and your client might say something to you such as, I want to go after this thing, or I want to write the next great American novel, or I want to travel Europe, but something comes in and says, you're so selfish, like it's just totally focused on yourself. Who do you think you are? Great, let's reframe that. Is it really selfish to travel? I mean, let's really look at this for a second. It's selfish to travel? Right? Because I can think of a lot of behaviors that are selfish, like taking the last of an item intentionally, even though you don't really need to. That seems kind of selfish. Or not caring what anybody else thinks when the group is trying to make a decision about where to go to dinner, and only saying, I will only eat tacos tonight and I will not eat pizza, even if everybody else in the group wants to eat pizza. And it seems a little selfish. But traveling? These are the places you get to play with, and as clients start to reframe a limiting story, you're not trying to put, like I said, the glitter and sparkle on it necessarily, but you're just trying to go, wait, is this really true? And let me reframe in a more positive direction. Like, hey, actually traveling the world is going to give me an expanded worldview, or, traveling the world isn't selfish because it's going to fill my cup. And when I come back to wherever home base is, I will have more capacity for the things in my life that require a lot of me. Next, after reframing limiting stories, reaching out and creating community. We are living in an isolation wasteland in so many ways. People really struggle with feeling like other people don't get who they are, they can't relate. Phones, you can blame it on that. Politics, you can blame it on that. Whatever you want to put it on, the reality is that there's a struggle in place. It's hard, and people need community more than ever. So the reason that you want community is because when you the research shows that, like, we often are the products of our environments. Connections can provide you with accountability. It's very psychologically healthy for people to have a sense of belonging. You often reinforce positive habits whenever you're around people who are practicing those same habits. So essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, okay, instead of just letting the inner critic run the show, or instead of trying to handle the critic by avoiding, placating, or attacking, when the critic comes up, I'm going to pause, breathe, access the body, take care of myself somatically, notice what's coming up for me, notice the triggers of fear. Then I'm going to listen without attachment. I'm going to go ahead and engage. What is that critic trying to say? Instead of ignoring it, instead of fighting, I'm just going to listen. I'm going to find out what it's trying to protect me from. Because if you really listen with enough compassion, the critic is often going to say something like, actually, I'm talking to you like this because I don't want you to go out there and make a fool of yourself. Well, boom, right there. That's what you're afraid of. And instead of letting that critic, rule you with this idea, you're going to make a fool of yourself, you reframe it. I'm not going to make a fool out of myself. I'm going to go after the thing that I want. And I might make mistakes and it might be embarrassing, but embarrassment is survivable. And you're encouraging your clients to also reach out and create community. And by the way, I know sometimes people can be very isolated in terms of like where they live geographically and things like that. There are online communities, or I would even say that listening to podcasts of positive messages is a form of community in the sense that, it's reinforcing that more pro-social, you're not the only one who thinks that way kind of mentality. So this work, like I said at the top of the podcast, it starts with you. Because if you are running client sessions where your client says, I've had a lot of negative voices in my head, and you're saying, okay, well, let's take some time and talk to those voices. Let's tell them to shove it. Let's tell them you're just reinforcing abuse. You're just reinforcing abuse. And if you have been operating that way with your clients and you are feeling like any of this is relevant to you and you're kind of going, I kind of want to change it now that I'm thinking about this, hey, you can absolutely go to your clients and say, I actually have had a shift in perspective on some of this. Here's what I've come to realize. I think it's important for you as a coach to model compassion when clients bring up fear or self-criticism, and support your clients to reframe critical thoughts. Because I'm here to tell you that when you do this work and when you do it consistently, what happens is instead of your critic always rushing in with the mean stuff, or instead of feeling like I'm too overwhelmed to even deal with my critic, I'm going to placate, I'm going to avoid it. What happens is the critic stops being so harsh and so mean and starts saying things like, okay, I'm really afraid right now. Literally, I'm saying that an internalized voice within me now talks to me like that. I'm afraid right now. And that internalized voice, if somebody's coming at you and saying you suck, it's a lot harder to deal with than if somebody comes to you and says, I'm really afraid right now. When your critic starts to tell you what's really going on, then you can work with it. Then you can shift it. So here's to a more respectful, more healing relationship with your critic. Again, for resources, check out my book, The Courage Habit. You are also welcome to visit yourcourageouslife.com/begin, because there are some free audios and worksheets of how to use these tools, and you can access them. Your clients can access them. Again, that's yourcourageouslife.com/begin. Become a subscriber and you get access to the library. This is essential work for your clients and for yourself. The critic does not need to run your life. And when you meet it with compassion, I promise you, its grip starts to loosen and you step into more courage. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, would you help us out and take a moment to give us a rating in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening? It really helps us get the word out to other listeners. And before you go today, would you like free resources to support your coaching journey? Whether you're considering becoming a coach or you want advanced coach skills training, access our coaching resource library at teamclcc.com. Again, that's teamclcc.com. Can't wait to connect with you. And again, thanks for listening.